Hello, everyone. Welcome to this presentation today, where I'm joined by Trent Butler from Trent Butler Consulting Proprietary Limited, and we're going to talk about considerations when marketing business advisory services to your clients and the broader marketplace. How are you today, Trent?
Yeah, good, Peter. Nice to be with you, and always nice to have a chat. So I'm going to like this new format where we can just talk one-to-one about these issues, because there's a few of them, I think,
Yeah,
to
that's
go
right.
through.
And we probably should just explain what we're going to do is each week I'm going to be joined by one of the affiliates of ESS BIZTOOLS, and we're going to have a discussion about issues pertaining to accountants, business advisors, bookkeepers. And if you're a small business operator, you're most welcome to join us as well and perhaps give us some feedback about the type of services you might like to be receiving from your key professional advisors. Trent Butler's a chartered accountant and is also an expert in marketing, particularly in the social media arena. So, Trent, what do you see as the considerations that accountants should be given to their marketing strategies as we approach the start of 2021?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's a few elements to it, because I think it really depends on where that particular firm is and where they want to go within their practice. So there's no real one size fits all. And in the context of ESS BizTools and what you're doing, it depends whether or not a firm is adopting a local practice approach, which is really focused predominantly on compliance, and maybe they've made the decision to just stick to that sort of business offering, or whether they're on the other end and they're doing some sort of advisory services in some sort of split, so some sort of mix between compliance and advisory, or whether they sit and have gone all in on just doing exclusively advisory services and forgoing tax and compliance. And we are seeing in the market, there are those firms that have made that decision and are executing that sort of model, which is quite interesting. I don't think in years gone by that's really been the case, but there are seemingly a growing number of accounting firms taking that stance of all in on advisory, and that's definitely coming through publicly in the marketing mix in Australia right now, particularly.
Yes, I noticed that in some of the discussions at the Accounting Business Expo last week.
Yeah.
I spoke to some firms some couple of years ago, and it was a dream they had that one day they would end up 100%. They'd outsource their compliance work. And I spoke to someone the other day who rang me about ESS BizTools products, who tells me he's 100% non-compliance. So it's an interesting trend. Where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, I have a couple of ideas. I think it's probably driven by the younger accountant. I think in terms of those that are going all in on advisory services and forgoing compliance work entirely, it seems to be driven by a younger type accountant who probably doesn't have the client base, or has for whatever reason chosen not to develop a client base in compliance. And so, yeah, that's definitely been an observation. It's also driven by, and here I'm talking about the firms that are all in on advisory, not necessarily adopting a mix. It seems to be, those firms that have just made that conscious decision really, and want to get into it, and don't necessarily like compliance services, and want to stick to advisory stuff. But yeah, it's definitely driven seemingly by that younger generation. At the same time, though, there seems to be a more and more firms in compliance that want to shift that mix across. So they want to do more advisory relative to lower compliance. And I think that's a very different journey, certainly from a marketing perspective, but also from just a business development perspective as well, in terms of what they do. So there's a lot of different issues and trends. Yeah, plenty to navigate for different types of firms, that's for sure.
Yeah, Trent. I've also though come across a few older gentlemen getting up into my vintage, and some of them have come out of a commercial background. They might have worked in the profession years ago, and they then went into commerce. And at 50, 55 years of age, for various reasons, which none of them have gone into with me, they're they've gone back into the public arena, but primarily wanting to concentrate on what is now their very strong skill set, I imagine, and
Yeah,
that is being able to deliver a chief financial officer type role.
yeah, absolutely. That's the second bucket. So yeah, not necessarily the younger accountant, but also separately, the background might be, yeah, as you said, they've come through a corporate sort of structure that they may or may not have the requisite experience in compliance. So almost by default, they're not going there, because the barrier to enter that market now for accountants is, I think you need 2 years or 1 year experience and a whole bunch of other things. Plus a firm that will actually sign off your ticket, which isn't always the case. So I think the barrier is there, and those people that are executing that, yeah, they're coming from just a different career trajectory than compliance, which is interesting.
So we'll start with them first, if we can.
Yeah.
What sort of marketing strategies should they be implementing? Because where are they going to get their clients from?
Yeah.
And secondly, what do they do about compliance services? Do they network with accounting firms who are wanting to specialize in being compliance experts? And there's nothing wrong with that, is there? That we're still going to need good tax experts forever, because we're always going to have taxation.
No, it's happening in the marketplace already. So I won't be naming names in the session today, but there are firms out there that are quite publicly in saying we do not do any compliance-based work. We are 100% advisory. We don't compete with your tax accountant in that regard, and that's what we're doing. So I think that the first thing to decide is you've got to make a decision. So you've got to actually consciously make a decision to go into advisory. And if you have made that decision that you're going to go down this path, then I think thinking about marketing makes sense. If you don't have any clients and you're going to get into this space, well, you've really got to get to market and go external. I think that's the luxury that those with existing client bases have, that want to sort of try and shift the mix. At least they've got a pool and a trusted network of already paying clients in compliance that they can perhaps cherry pick from. But if you're just starting from scratch, I think there's certainly, from a marketing perspective, you're going to need the foundational elements in play to be taken seriously. So you're going to need to have things like website, you're going to need to have a thing like social media presence, and it's going to need to reflect and represent who you are as a professional, demonstrate expertise, but also outline broadly what your offer is to the marketplace. And I think if you're just getting started, then from there, it's the local things. It's not necessarily online straight away, but it's your chamber of commerce, it's your existing personal connections, it's your background, where you've come from, particularly if you've had the luxury of coming from a corporate sort of space. There's usually some existing contacts that can be tapped into from that perspective. So you don't necessarily need to launch into a full-blown marketing campaign like some of the advisory firms where we're seeing and working within the marketplace. But I think definitely the low-hanging fruit as a first port of call needs to be the way to go.
And for those firms, anyone listening who's starting up, obviously ESS BIZTOOLS product packages can assist those firms to get started, to be offering those services.
Yeah, I think that's where you sort of come into the mix, Peter, really well, is I think where firms have made the decision to come into advisory, they immediately think, well, I need to get clients. I think the step before that is we need to actually have a valid offer to go to market to get clients. And so that may require skilling or upskilling to some extent. But I think that's where your product perhaps really does help. It's having a bit of a structure and knowing exactly what how to actually execute at least the initial work before going to the market. And that's going to give you confidence as well in providing those services.
Yeah, I've had a few questions of late from people talking to me about the business advisory services packages that ESS BIZTOOLS has. And they were quite interested that we had some marketing material included in each of our 23 product packages. So they're aware that they need to get the message out to their current clients, to their prospects in their area, the organisations like their local Chamber of Commerce, which hopefully they're members of. They'll get far better traction if they are. But having some promotional material they can put on their website, and perhaps some ideas of posts that they might put on the social media. Is there anything else you think they could be doing?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the starting point to it. I'd probably suggest if they're already a compliance-focused firm, and I'm assuming in this case they have never done advisory, or they're just getting started with it. I think in that case it makes sense to, rather than do a mass marketing campaign to the whole client base, first of all get clear on the type of service you're going to provide. I think that's number one, and then number two, find the firms or the clients within the client base that can be your first group of beta testers for that particular service. So I think before you go the marketing route, assuming you're just getting started, of course, because it's a different sort of thinking if you're already in this space. But your first go doesn't need to be a mass market approach. It should just be a cherry pick approach based on your existing contacts and network. And there's no harm in going to that group and saying, hey, look, we've just upskilled in this new area. We've identified your firm specifically because we think that this can help you, make or save, X amount of dollars potentially, or avoid a certain adverse outcome. Would you be interested in being a beta tester participant as part of that process? And anyone in their right mind, if you've framed it in terms of what's in it for them, they're going to say, yeah, I'm interested, let's talk. So I think that's generally something to be considered. It doesn't necessarily need to be mass market for those that are just getting started, but it's probably a little bit of a different story if you're already in that space, you've got runs on the board and you're looking to scale up a little bit. So.
Yeah, and one of those scaling up opportunities, I think, is going to be helping SMEs get their business funding in place for 2021, 2022. The Australian government's Small Business Ombudsman, Kate Carnell, has published a document that she sent to the banks asking them to go easy on SMEs for at least the next couple of years. I think there's an opportunity there for accountants who have gained an understanding of how the new capital raising entities operate, crowdsource funding, equity raising, and early stage innovation companies, to be able to at least have a conversation with their clients, an informed conversation as the expert, to make them have an understanding of how all this process works. Is there any marketing strategies those firms should be adopting to go into this, what is a new area? It's only been available for 3.5 years. It's a new area. And I sense a lot of accountants are either unaware of it or a bit nervous.
Yeah, I mean, from a strategy perspective, I'd probably be listening to my client. Have I had feedback from the client base, or have I had phone calls around difficulties from a cash flow perspective, or wanting to raise funding for some other reason? I'd probably look to know, am I seeing evidence of that in my client base? And if I am, then I'd probably send out a bit of an email to see if there was some more potential demand for that. But yeah, again, it doesn't necessarily need a mass market approach. I think the onus is on the practitioner if they've decided to offer that as a service. You've got to go through your own list and work out, all right, these are the eligible firms for that service, and then take a more tailored approach to approaching them. I think once you've got runs on the board and you can demonstrate you can actually execute that properly, then it makes sense to offer it broader to the client base.
In other words, use a rifle, not a shotgun, and
correct.
Go in and try to really identify that client.
I think that's correct. If you don't have a client base and you want to offer a service like that, then I think you do need to just go to a marketing, a public domain sort of approach, leveraging tools like LinkedIn appropriately, for one example, as a way of sort of starting conversations and getting that out there that your firm has that capability, and just see what happens. But again, in a best case scenario, you've got that client base that you can start that conversation with, for no other reason really than just getting a sense of that, yes, this is actually wanted by my clients, and it's worth me investing resources to do it. So
you mentioned LinkedIn then. This whole question of social media wasn't around 10 years ago. It is now a very important process. The accountants out there who are starting up, especially in offering these non-compliance services, should
Yeah.
they be making sure that they're fully operational when it comes to products like LinkedIn and Facebook?
Yeah, I think stepping back from the actual tool or platform, the thing to keep in mind with these advisory type services is the market in Australia generally isn't necessarily aware of exactly what they are. And so by that, I mean, accounting, everyone knows what accounting is. Bookkeeping, everyone knows what bookkeeping is. And so the impetus is then on the people that are providing these services to actually go out and educate the market on what the service actually is. So if you are deciding to go down this path, you are an educator, you are someone that needs to be out there, be seen to be demonstrating what these services can do and actually educating the market. And when I spoke to you offline, Peter, because a lot of our clients are in other professions, and I was drawing parallels between advisory services and where sort of the buyer's agency service is within Australia at the moment. And I think it's probably 5 to 10 years ahead of where a lot of these sort of advisory services that we're talking about for accountants are. And what buyers agents have been doing for the last sort of 5 or 10 years is been very publicly educating the market. So in that industry, there's no conversation around you need to actually be seen to be talking about the benefits of your product or service. It's just a done thing within that space. And I think that's the attitude that's currently being taken by those firms that are doing advisory well. But those that want to get into that space, you need to realize that you're joining part of your role in doing so is being an educator within the market. And if you're not comfortable with that, you either need to get comfortable with it or not do it. That'd be my advice.
Yes, it's part of the challenges. Nothing stays the same, does it? The accounting industry has gone through a lot of ups and downs and new developments over the last 40 years that I've been around it. And that's going to continue. And if anything, it's going to get faster, how all this happens. And I think accountants need to be really aware of where their clients are at and really identifying the ones that do want to scale up, do want to get bigger. It's a dangerous position to mark time in anything, and in particular in businesses. So most clients will want to grow. And I suspect that every SME business needs some chief financial officer service input. Some would only be valued at a couple of $1,000. Others might be 50,000, could be $100,000 in fees. Depends on their size, their aspirations, and what sort of internal support they got. So how do you market that?
Yeah, CFO service. Well, I think first of all you've got to know what you're doing to market it. There's no point sort of trying to market something you're not good at. So to upskill if that's not currently in your wheelhouse, and that's where someone like ESS, is just invaluable because you've already got that all worked out. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing to market it is to, rather than talk to the actual service, which people, what I always say to clients is no one wants what you sell, they just want their problem solved. So you've got to start having conversations and language around what is the desired outcome or what would be in it for the other person, and what adverse situation are you helping them avoid. So for a CFO service, you might be providing a roadmap for the growth journey that they want to go on over the next 12 months. And so you're providing them that confidence and clarity, if you like. So those words are quite important as their strategic partner to help them get there. That's just in the context of CFO advisory. And then your role then is to help educate and demonstrate to the market exactly that service exists, because the average small business owner, turnover up to even up to say 50 million, might not even realize that this service actually exists. They think that they have to pay someone 200, 300 grand a year to get that sort of advice. And that's the other element too, is it's potentially a cost saving factor as well. So, you can employ someone for 200 grand and they'll probably churn out within 2 years anyway. you have to start again from scratch in that role. Or alternatively, if there's people out there that have invested time and resources to build that up, then they can get it for a fraction of that cost. And so that's another way at a core high level. I'm not getting into the tactical elements of that, but from a high level messaging perspective, to me, that makes a lot of sense as well, is to come at it from a cost saving perspective. So, yeah.
Trent, on the 16th and 17th of November, we had the Accountants Business Expo, which is a continuation of the events that accounting stalwarts like Mark Smith and Andrew Geddes Mark Holton, David Smith and Andrew Geddes presented over the years. I was very happy to see the number of presentations that were made under the heading Business Advisory Services and Chief Financial Officer Services. I've been going to these events for a long time. I've never really seen those two key headings on the list of what, admittedly there were 12 at lists of deliveries at the Accountants Business Expo. So did you, I know you made a presentation. In fact, we did distribute that on to subscribers and prospects last week. Did you see anything interesting there as far as any new services that people are offering, or any areas that obviously screamed out for some marketing input to make them come across better?
No, I just second your observation that, yeah, there was a lot of presenters and commentary on business advisory services, certainly more than I'd seen as well in previous years. So there's a lot of people with thoughts in this space. That's certainly for sure. It just clarified for me that there's really two schools or two different types of people that seem to be going in this direction. So school one is the compliance practice that seems to want to head towards more advisory. And I think the journey is very different for those firms compared to the other schools, offer more of a chief financial officer, management accountant sort of role on an outsourced basis. So they seem to be, that was my takeaway from the expo. And it just confirmed what I'd sort of seen previously in the marketplace. So firms that are doing advisory seem to sit on a spectrum of that. And I think the journey, certainly from a marketing perspective, is a different one depending on where you sit in that sort of spectrum.
Now, if any of our viewers, listeners wish to contact you, how do they do so?
Yeah, probably best thing to do is just jump on our website. So butlerandcomarketing.com, and that's you'll see what we're up to. We don't just work with accountants, I should say, Peter. We work with a broad range of industries, and I raise that because, with my chartered background, I have quite a bit of an unusual amount of knowledge in this sort of advisory space, and I'm working with other firms in that space as well. So a lot of my comments are sort of a bit more educated than other sort of marketing people, but yeah, just sort of put that out there because we do work with other sorts of professionals as well.
And you mentioned this buyer's agent that's obviously prevalent now in the real estate agency industry.
Yeah.
Were you alluding to that becoming more prominent as a process within accounting firms?
Yeah, well, from a marketing perspective, I think it certainly is. So if I won't do it now, but if people want to see what I'm talking about, if they type in buyer's agent in their capital city, there'll be any number of advertising advertisements that come up into Google. And if you click through and onto the websites of those people, you'll see a lot of marketing materials. So you'll see videos, you'll see educational content, you'll see frequently asked questions around what is a buyer's agent. You'll generally just see it's more of an educational tone to the content that's being promoted and put online. And that's the journey, frankly, the unavoidable journey that firms that want to dip their toe in advisory services are going to need to go on. They're going to need to be make an investment not only in the operational side, which is sort of where your product sort of helps, but also on the educational side as well. And I think that's going to be critical. There's no point sort of, going into this space if you're just going to not be seen to be in it. You've got to be visible. And that's the journey that buyer's agents have gone on. 10 years ago, I'm not sure if anyone had heard of a buyer's agent or
No.
someone representing, and many people on the phone or on the call may not even know what one is. They essentially, like a real estate agent, but they act solely for the seller. So, the buyer, not the seller. So, and they have the buyer's best interest at heart. So
do you see that type of buyer's agent might be in place to help SMEs go out and find someone who can put together a business plan, budgets, cash flows, projected balance sheets, help them
what do
with
you mean?
their... So do you think SMEs are going to be going out and hiring an agent that can facilitate finding the right accountant or professional service provider who can do their services for them?
I think we've just seen too much evidence of that already happening in the marketplace. So, caveat, I don't observe my clients' accounts. I haven't audited their files. I don't know what their profitability is. But there's just been too many long-standing players that have been participating in this space publicly for some time to think it's unlikely that there's firms getting value from that sort of service.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's happening, but it's, as I said, the firms that seem to be investing in this space, they're not timid about it. They're sort of all in. And yeah, there just seems to be too many examples of firms succeeding. So yeah, I think it is.
Okay, very interesting, and obviously time will tell. And some of our listeners, obviously, if the majority of them are accountants and bookkeepers and business advisors, you might need to think about that as to where things are going, because what Mark's emphasising here, I think, is education is very important. And within ESS BizTools, we've got quite a lot of material which will help educate you as the accountant, first of all, and then secondly, can be forwarded to your client to educate them, because they're the ones that are going to pay the bills. So they need to know what these things mean.
Yeah.
What are they going to be getting back? How's it going to help them run a better business?
I should clarify as well, Peter, just on that last comment, because I am seeing, and there does seem to be firms publicly succeeding, although I don't have their accounts, but equally, and by the same token, I am seeing other firms still succeeding and do very well in just providing compliance services. I've just got to put that out there.
Yep,
I'm not saying I'm not one of these people that are saying compliance is dead. I don't think it is. And similar to my last comment, there's just as much evidence to suggest that compliance is succeeding relative to other services. So I'm not as aggressive as some as suggesting it's a must do. But for those that want to get into this space, I think that the foundational elements are being met by some other firms to suggest it may work, and it may be something that's worthwhile for you to do.
Yes, I agree with you. Firms have got to want to do this advisory work. And if it doesn't suit the principal's personality, their understanding, some people are very comfortable in taxation. They understand it. They're experts in it. And as I said at the beginning, we're always going to have the need for good tax advisors in Australia.
100%.
We are
it's not going anywhere, is it?
If anything, we're going to be going to higher taxes rather than lower taxes. We've got a lot more people going into retirement age. Pensions are going to be increasing. The government's going to have to find more and more money, I think, as we go forward, if we want the same standard of living. So I'm sure there's going to be a very important role for tax return accountants into the future. It's just that some of their SMEs, and not all of them by any stretch, are going to be looking for some more services, and it's providing those services. Otherwise, someone else will.
Yeah, and that's happening unquestionably. So there's relationships that I know of where there's an accountant who's doing the tax return, but then there's also this separate entity who's having that advisory relationship with them, and it's not the core accountant. So that's definitely already happening within Australia right now. Yep.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your input today, Trent.
No problem.
Next Wednesday, we have the second of these conversations where I'm going to be talking with Brisbane accountant and service provider Priscilla Bay-Smith from Cloud9 Associates. And we're going to talk about how accountants can be involved in assisting clients with understanding the funding that's currently available, especially out of crowdsourced funding, equity raising, early stage innovation company, and the special loans that have been 50% guaranteed by the Australian government, loans of up to $1 million that are available for SMEs. So thank you very much, Trent. And obviously, we'll also have your email address on our system. So if anyone needs to contact you, they can do so.
Yeah, most welcome. Nice talking to you, Peter, as always. And
thank you,
yeah, thanks for
everyone,
having me.
joining us. Those especially of you who were live. And gee, I forgot to check. No, I had no questions. So, but if you think of any questions later on, please send me an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au. I'll make sure that the question, if it's applicable to Trent, gets passed on to him to answer, and we will send the answers through to you. So have a great day. Goodbye. Thanks, Trent.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.